At the terminal his father built, he handed her a one-way ticket and the divorce papers together. "Go home. You were never one of us." His assistant laughed. The crowd stared. She signed without a word. What none of them knew was that the $40 billion airline above their heads already belonged to her. Let me take you back to that morning. The terminal was full. Glass walls, gold trim, jets lined up outside the windows like soldiers. Carter Atlantic Airways. The name glowed above every gate. It was the family's anniversary event, and the press was there, smiling, snapping pictures of a family that looked perfect. But you know the truth about perfect families. The shine is always covering a crack. Imani Carter stood near the back, the way she always did. Quiet, still. No jewelry that begged to be seen. She was the kind of woman a room forgets is there. And for 8 years, the Carters had counted on her being forgettable. Watch her closely, because the woman they ignored was the only one who mattered. Her husband, Elijah Carter, walked toward her with a folder under his arm. He was handsome in that loud way, the kind of man who needed eyes on him to feel alive. Behind him came his assistant, Brielle, young, sharp, wearing a red that said, "Look at me." She walked half a step behind Elijah, but her chin was up like she already owned the place. Imani saw it. She had seen it for months. "We need to talk," Elijah said, but he didn't lower his voice. He raised it. People turned. His mother, Gloria, turned with a small smile already on her lips, like she knew the show was about to start. His brother, Terrence, lifted his phone. Recording, always recording. Elijah opened the folder. He set 2 things on the marble counter between them: a plane ticket, one way, and divorce papers. "I'm done pretending," he said. "You don't fit here, you never did." The terminal went quieter, not silent. People leaned in. A man with a coffee stopped mid-sip. "Elijah," Imani said softly. "Just his name, just that." "Don't," he said. He pointed at the papers. "Sign, take the ticket, go back to whatever little town raised you. This family has an image. You're not part of it anymore." Brielle laughed, a small laugh, cruel and easy. And there it was, the triple cut. Her husband throwing her away in public, his family watching and filming and smiling, and the outsider, the woman who had crept into her marriage, one late night at a time, laughing like betrayal was a joke she got to tell. Gloria stepped closer and looked Imani up and down. "Honey," she said, "we always knew you came from nothing. Don't make a scene. Scenes are for people who matter." A photographer's camera clicked. Then another. The press had smelled it. A perfect family was cracking open in public, and they wanted every piece. A little boy near the windows tugged his mother's sleeve and asked why the lady looked sad. The mother told him to hush. Even a child could see it. Everyone could see it. That was the whole point. They didn't pick the terminal by accident. They picked it because shame travels farther in a crowd. Watch the family now. Watch how easy this is for them. Gloria checking her lipstick in a phone screen while her daughter-in-law's marriage ended 3 feet away. Terrence holding his camera steady, framing the shot. Cornelius off to the side, not even watching, like the whole thing was a meeting that had run a little long. And Elijah, chin up, soaking in the eyes on him, finally the center of a room. They had practiced this. You understand that, right? This wasn't a fight that boiled over. This was a plan, rehearsed, timed, aimed, now. Here is where most women would scream, or cry, or beg. Imani picked up the pen. She signed, calm, clean, one smooth line. She didn't shake. Did you notice that? Her hand did not shake. She slid the papers back. She left the one-way ticket sitting on the counter, untouched. And as she straightened up, her eyes lifted past Elijah, past Brielle, past Gloria's smug little face, all the way up to the name glowing gold above the gates. Carter Atlantic, and the corner of her mouth moved. Just barely, almost a smile. Why would a woman being thrown out of her own marriage almost smile? Hold on to that question. The walk to the doors was long. You ever had to walk a long way while a whole room watches you? Every step is a year. The heels click. The eyes burn the back of your neck. Somebody whispers. Somebody films. And the doors at the end look like they're getting farther away instead of closer. Imani walked it without slowing once. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. It hurt like a wound she'd be feeling for years. But Pop taught her something about pain a long time ago. He said pain is just proof you're still carrying something worth carrying. So she carried it all the way to the door. She picked up her small bag. She turned. And she walked out of that terminal with her back straight and her head high, through the crowd, past the press, into the gray morning outside. Behind her, Brielle slipped her hand into Elijah's. Gloria patted her son's cheek. Terence stopped recording and grinned at the screen. They thought they had buried her that day. But here's what they forgot. You don't bury a root by throwing dirt on it. You just plant it. A quiet woman is not an empty one. Watch what grows. To understand the woman who walked out of that terminal, you have to understand the girl who came before her. Imani was not born into glass and gold. She was born in a small southern town where the church had a tin roof, and the rain on it sounded like applause. Her father, a man named Mr. Okoye to the older folks, and just Pop to her, had once been an aircraft mechanic. Good hands, better mind. He could take a broken engine apart and find the one small thing everybody else missed. But the world back then didn't make room for a black man with a brilliant mind. So Pop fixed engines for other men's planes and watched other men's names go on the side of the fuselage. He never got bitter. That was the thing about him. He used to sit Imani on the porch steps and tell her the same thing over and over. "Baby girl," he'd say, "names are loud. Ownership is quiet. Anybody can paint their name on a thing, but the one who owns it never has to shout." She was maybe 9 years old. She didn't understand yet, but she remembered. I want you to see that porch for a second. A girl with her knees pulled up. A father with grease still under his nails from the day's work. The whole street was working folks. People who fixed and cleaned and cared for families whose names ended up on buildings. And every evening Pop came home tired but never beaten. And he taught his daughter the one thing he knew the world would try to steal from her, her sense of her own worth. "They'll measure you small," he told her once, while a storm rattled the tin roof above them. "By your clothes, by your street, by the way you talk. Let them measure wrong, baby girl. A wrong measurement only hurts the one who's measuring." She held those words the way some children hold a blanket, and when the storms of her grown life came, those were the words that kept her standing in that terminal without a single shake in her hand. Pop saved every dollar he could. He read books on contracts at the kitchen table by a lamp with a cracked shade. And slowly, quietly, over years, he built something small, a little holding company, just paperwork and patience. He bought tiny pieces of things, a share here, a stake there, nothing anyone noticed. And here is the moment that changed everything, though no one knew it at the time. There was an airline back then that was dying, a regional carrier drowning in debt, hours from shutting its doors for good. Its founder had a big name and a bigger ego and not enough cash to make payroll. He needed a buyer, a quiet one who wouldn't embarrass him by making the rescue public. Pop's little company stepped in. Now, listen closely, because this is the only time I'll put it in plain numbers. What Pop paid to save that dying airline felt, back then, like a modest fortune, enough to buy a few good houses, enough to make a working man's hands sweat as he signed. But that dying airline did not stay dying. It grew, and it grew. Over the years, it swallowed roots and rivals and turned into something monstrous and beautiful. The few good houses worth of savings Pop spent had quietly become an empire worth more than some entire countries earn in a year. and no one ever asked who the quiet buyer was. That founder with the big name and the bigger ego, his name was Cornelius Carter. The airline was Carter Atlantic, and the dying company Pop saved became the very gold-lettered name that would one day glow above the terminal where his daughter was thrown away. Picture that meeting, the day it happened. A young Cornelius Carter, proud even when he was breaking, sitting across a table from a quiet man in a worker's coat. Cornelius could barely look him in the eye. A man like Cornelius wasn't built to be saved by a man like Pop. It shamed him. So they made an arrangement. The papers would stay private. The world would never know who really pulled Carter Atlantic out of the grave. Cornelius got to keep his name shining and his pride intact. And Pop didn't care about the shine. He cared about the thing underneath it. He signed his name on the part nobody ever looks at, the ownership, the bones of it. He shook Cornelius Carter's hand, walked out into the parking lot, got into an old truck, and drove home to a tin-roofed town to tell nobody. "Why didn't you ever tell folks, Pop?" Imani asked him once, years later, when she finally understood what he'd done. He just smiled. "Because the man who has to tell you he's powerful," he said, "isn't. You see it now, don't you? But they didn't. Not yet. Before Pop died, he was sick a long time." Imani sat by his bed every night, and on the last clear evening he reached under his pillow and pressed something small into her palm. A brass luggage tag, old, worn smooth at the edges from his thumb, and on the back, in letters he'd had a man engrave by hand, it said 4 words. "You carry your own name. Don't let nobody tell you what you're worth," he whispered. "They'll try, they always try. Let them think you're small. Small things move where big things can't." Then he closed his eyes, and the quietest, strongest man Imani ever knew was gone. She kept that brass tag with her every single day after that, in her pocket, in her palm, through everything. Remember it. You'll see it again. So how did a girl from a tin-roofed town end up married to Cornelius Carter's son? Love. Plain and simple. She met Elijah at a charity dinner years later, before he knew who she really was, before she'd told a soul what her father had built. He was charming then. He made her laugh, and for a while he looked at her like she was the only quiet thing in a loud world that he actually wanted to hear. She married him for love. Not legacy, not revenge. Love. And because she loved him, she made herself small. She let Cornelius take credit for everything. She let Gloria talk down to her at every dinner. She never corrected them. She never said the words that would have ended it all in one sentence. She swallowed it, year after year, because that's what soft hearts do. They give and give, hoping one day the giving will be seen. The gentle girl on the porch steps had become a woman who shrank herself daily so a family could feel tall. But the breaking hadn't even started yet. The cruelty didn't start at the terminal. The terminal was just the day it went public. It started quietly, the way these things always do. A late meeting that ran longer than it should have. A perfume that wasn't Imani's lingering on Elijah's collar. A phone turned face down on the table. Brielle had come into the company 2 years before as Elijah's assistant, and she was good at her job. I'll give her that. But she was better at reading people. She watched Elijah closely, and she saw what Imani had stopped pretending not to see. She saw a man starving, because here's the truth about Elijah Carter, and it's the kind of truth that makes a villain human. Elijah had spent his whole life as the son of Cornelius Carter, not a man, a son of. Every room he walked into, people looked past him to find his father. Every deal he closed, somebody said it was the Carter name that did it, not him. He had built nothing, owned nothing that wasn't handed down. And deep down, in the place he never showed anybody, Elijah was terrified that he was nothing without that name. And Brielle? Brielle understood being nothing. She'd grown up watching her own mother get used up and thrown away by a man who promised her the world and left her with the rent. Brielle had decided something young. She would never be the one left behind. She would be the one who left. She would never be poor again, no matter who she had to climb over. So she whispered to Elijah. Not lies at first, just questions. Don't you ever feel like she makes you smaller? She'd say. A man like you should be the face of this company, not standing in your father's shadow, not married to a woman who can barely look the press in the eye. Do you hear it? She didn't sell him a woman. She sold him a version of himself, a bigger one, the one he was desperate to be. That's how good betrayal works. It doesn't tempt you with someone else. It tempts you with who you wish you were. Then came the lies that did have teeth. Brielle started leaving things where Elijah would find them. A photo, angled just so, of Imani laughing with a male colleague. A receipt from a hotel restaurant where Imani had met her father's old lawyer for a quiet quarterly lunch. A phone record Brielle half explained and half invented. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, Brielle said, eyes wet, hand on his arm. But you deserve to know. She's not who you think she is. And here is the saddest part. Elijah believed her, not because the evidence was good, it wasn't, but because believing it made leaving easier. If Imani was guilty, then he wasn't a cheater, he was a victim. Believing the lie let him keep his pride. The family helped it along. Cornelius and Gloria had never wanted Imani. She didn't photograph right for the brand. She didn't come from the right people. And now, with a big public valuation event coming, the family wanted her gone clean. No mess, no scandal, just gone before the cameras came. Cut it loose before the announcement, Gloria told her son over dinner, like Imani was a bad investment and not a human being. You'll thank me. So they planned it. The terminal, the papers, the public humiliation. They wanted it public on purpose, so Imani would be too ashamed to ever come back. But before the terminal there was a dinner, the last one Imani ever sat through in that house. I have to tell you about it because it's the moment a soft woman stopped hoping. They were all there. Cornelius at the head of the table, Gloria pouring wine, Terence laughing too loud at his own jokes, and Brielle. They had brought Brielle to a family dinner now, sat her right across from the wife. That's how little they thought of Imani by then. You've been quiet, dear, Gloria said to Imani, smiling like a knife. But then, you're always quiet. I suppose some people just don't have much to say. The table laughed. All of them. Even Elijah, especially Elijah. He laughed at his own wife to keep his place, at a table that was never really his. And Imani looked down at her plate and felt the last warm thing inside her go cold. Not because of Gloria. She was used to Gloria. It was the laugh, her husband's laugh. The sound of a man choosing a room full of cruel people over the one person who had loved him for nothing. She said nothing. She set her fork down. She folded her napkin, and under the table, her thumb found the brass tag in her pocket and held it like a hand. Do you see it now? They thought her silence meant they had won. It never did. Her silence was just the sound of a woman deciding, and it worked. At first. After that morning, Imani went home to the quiet house, and something in her finally cracked. She didn't cry loud. She cried the way strong people cry, with no sound at all. She sat on the edge of the bed for hours. She stopped eating. She stopped answering the phone. The numbness came over her like cold water, and she let it, because feeling nothing was easier than feeling all of it. She held the brass tag in the dark, ran her thumb over the worn letters. You carry your own name. I'm sorry, Pop, she whispered to the dark. I let them make me small. A quiet woman is not an empty one, but that night even she had trouble believing it. Let me tell you what those 3 days looked like, because this is the part of the story most people never see, the part before the strength. The part where the strong woman is just a woman on a bathroom floor. She didn't open the curtains. The food in the kitchen went bad. The phone lit up and went dark, lit up and went dark, and she watched it like it belonged to somebody else's life. She thought about every dinner she'd swallowed, every laugh she'd pretended not to hear, 8 years of making herself smaller and smaller until there was almost nothing left to throw away. And the cruelest voice in that quiet house was her own. "You should have known," it said. "You let them. You handed them the knife and showed them where to push." Have you ever heard that voice? The one that kicks you while you're already down. That voice almost won. But here's the thing about a woman raised by a man who read contracts by a cracked lamp. Even broken, even on the floor, some part of her was still listening for her father. And on the third night, in the dark, she swore she heard him, plain as the porch steps. Names are loud. Ownership is quiet. She opened her hand. The brass tag was still there. It had been there the whole time. For 3 days, she barely moved. And maybe that's where it would have ended. Maybe she'd have taken that one-way ticket after all and disappeared back to the tin-roof town and let the Carters have their gold-lettered lie. But on the 4th day, the phone rang, and this time she answered. It was an old voice, steady, warm. A man named Mr. Adisa, her father's lawyer, the keeper of every quiet thing Pop had ever built. The man Imani met for lunch once a quarter. The lunch Brielle had twisted into something dirty. "I heard," Mr. Adisa said gently. "The whole city heard. Imani, you don't have to carry this anymore. Everything your father built, everything that is legally completely yours. Say the word and I file the papers tomorrow." Silence on the line. "It's time," he said. "Say when." And for the first time in months, Imani breathed all the way in. She looked at the brass tag in her hand. She thought about her father by the lamp with the cracked shade, reading contracts no one believed a man like him could understand. She thought about 8 years of swallowing her own voice. "Not tomorrow," she said softly. "No." "There's a gala," she said. "The valuation, the whole family, the whole press." She closed her hand around the tag. "I'll tell them myself." But what happened at that gala, no one in the Carter family saw coming. The night of the valuation, the ballroom was the brightest place in the city. This was the night Carter Atlantic Airways would be unveiled to the world as one of the largest carriers alive. Investors in black suits, cameras everywhere. A stage with a screen 2 stories tall, the gold name shining on it. Waiters with trays, champagne in every hand. And on that stage stood the family. Cornelius, gray at the temples, proud as a king. Gloria beside him, dripping in jewels. Terence near the wings. And front and center, where Imani should have been, stood Elijah, with Brielle on his arm. She wore white, bold as you like, already playing the part of the next Mrs. Carter. Elijah took the microphone. He was glowing. This was his moment. The night he stepped out of his father's shadow and into the light he'd always believed he deserved. "Tonight," he said, "Carter Atlantic isn't just my father's dream, it's the future, my future. And the future is built with the right people beside you." He looked at Brielle. The crowd clapped politely. Cornelius nodded, ready to step forward and announce the family's controlling stake to the world. And that's when the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Watch closely now, because everything changes in the next 60 seconds. A woman walked in, but not the small woman in the soft brown coat. This woman wore deep navy, sharp and simple, the kind of elegant that doesn't need to shout. Her back was straight. Her steps were slow, unhurried, like the room belonged to her and she had all the time in the world. Beside her walked an older man with silver hair and a leather folder, Mr. Adisa, and behind them a line of men and women in suits that no one in that ballroom recognized. Imani. The clapping died. Heads turned. A murmur moved through the crowd like wind through grass. Elijah's smile froze on his face. "What is she doing here?" he said into the live mic, too stunned to lower it. "Security, get her out." No one moved, because Mr. Adisa raised one hand, calm as Sunday, and the security guards, the ones who had been quietly briefed an hour before, stepped back instead of forward. Imani walked to the foot of the stage. She did not rush. She looked up at her husband, at Brielle in her white dress, at Cornelius, at Gloria. "You wanted me to leave quietly," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The whole room had gone still to hear it. "I did. I left the terminal quietly. I signed quietly. I've done everything in my life quietly." She climbed the steps to the stage. Slow, sure. "My father taught me how," she said. "Names are loud. Ownership is quiet." "Imani, stop this," Gloria hissed, stepping forward. "You're embarrassing yourself." Imani turned to her, calm, almost kind. "Am I?" She took the microphone from Elijah's frozen hand. He let it go. He didn't even fight it. Something in his stomach had already started to fall. "You can keep the name," Imani said to the room, to the cameras, to all of it. "The name was always your father's, Cornelius Carter. It looks beautiful up there in gold." She glanced at the two-story screen. "But every plane under that name, every gate, every dollar you came here tonight to toast, they have answered to me for 15 years. The room didn't gasp all at once. It was worse than that. It rippled. Investors leaned to each other. Phones came up. "That's a lie," Cornelius said, but his voice cracked on the word. And he didn't step forward. Did you catch that? The proud king did not step forward. Mr. Adisa opened his leather folder and laid a single document on the podium. Imani placed her hand flat on it. 15 years ago, she said, Carter Atlantic was hours from dead. Cornelius Carter couldn't make payroll. He needed a buyer quiet enough not to wound his pride. A man stepped in, a mechanic, a man with good hands and a better mind that the world never made room for. He saved this airline for what felt then like a modest fortune, the price of a few good houses, money a working man's hand sweats to sign away. She paused. That man was my father, and what he bought has grown into something worth more than most nations earn in a year. He owned this company until the day he died, and then he left it to me. She lifted the brass luggage tag from her palm and held it up. It caught the light. He gave me this the night he passed. 4 words. She turned it. You carry your own name. She looked straight at Elijah. Those same 4 words are engraved on the founding ownership documents in this folder. He had them carved into the company itself. Because he knew. He knew that one day the people who painted their name on his work would try to throw his daughter away like she was nothing. Now look at Brielle, the white dress, the smile sliding off her face like wax off a candle. And look at Cornelius. This is the part nobody expected. The crowd was waiting for the king to rage, to shout, to call her a liar again. Instead, Cornelius Carter slowly reached for the back of a chair, and he sat down, right there on the stage, in front of the cameras, in front of the world, because Cornelius had always suspected. Deep down in the place a proud man hides his shame, he had always known the rescue 15 years ago was too clean, too quiet, too kind. He'd taken the help and asked no questions because asking would have meant admitting he'd been saved. He had built his whole life, his whole name, his family's whole crown, on a foundation he knew was never truly his. And now, in front of everyone, the truth he'd buried sat down on his chest and would not get up. He was the witness, the one whose face told the whole room it was true. Brielle tried. Give her that. She stepped forward in her white dress, chin up, the way she'd climbed her whole life. This is a stunt, she said loud to the cameras. She has no proof. She's a bitter woman who got left. And now she— "You met me once," Imani said. Quiet. She didn't even turn all the way around. "In the lobby of this building. You held the door for me and didn't know my face. Do you remember what you said?" Brielle's mouth opened. Nothing came. "You said, 'Visitors sign in at the desk, sweetheart.'" Imani let that sit. "You spent 2 years climbing toward the top of a company, and you never once realized you were already standing in front of the woman who owned the building." A sound moved through the crowd, not a laugh. Something colder, the sound of a room watching someone fall. Brielle stepped back. The white dress didn't look bold anymore. It just looked like a costume for a wedding that was never going to happen. Elijah finally found his voice. "Imani." It came out small. "Imani, wait. We can talk. I didn't know. If I'd known—" She turned to him, and for the first time there was no softness she owed him, only the truth. "If you'd known I was rich, you'd have stayed," she said quietly. "That's not love, Elijah. That's an invoice." The room was silent now, truly silent. "You signed me away for the cost of a quiet life," she said. "You just signed away everything your father spent his whole life pretending he owned." She set the microphone down on the podium, gentle, like setting down something fragile. Then she said it, to the room, to the cameras, to the girl she used to be on the porch steps. "A quiet woman is not an empty one." And she stepped down off the stage. What happens to a man when the only thing holding him up turns out to be borrowed? He falls, but slowly. That's the cruelest part. By morning, the story was everywhere. Not the story the Carters had planned. The other one. The quiet wife. The mechanic father. The truth that had been sitting in plain sight for 15 years, while everybody looked the other way. Investors don't stay loyal to a name once they learn the name was never the owner. The board met within the week. And the board, it turned out, now answered to Imani. She did not have to lift her voice in that room either. She simply sat at the head of the table where Cornelius used to sit, and she let the documents speak. Elijah was removed. Cleanly. The way they had tried to remove her. He kept no title, no office, no stake. Everything he'd ever had came from the name, and the name had never been his to begin with. He ended exactly as the thing he feared most, his whole life. A son of, with nothing of his own. I want you to sit with the cruelty of that for a moment. Elijah threw his wife away because he was afraid of being nothing. He betrayed the one person who loved him for no reason at all, chasing the feeling of being a big man. And the chase is exactly what made him small. He had a woman who would have shared an empire with him if he'd only stayed faithful. He'd had it all in his hands, and he traded it for a red dress and a louder room. That's the thing about fear. It always costs you the very thing you were afraid of losing. He tried, in the weeks after, to call her. Once, twice, a dozen times. He left messages that started angry and ended begging. She never picked up, not out of spite. She just had nothing left to say to a man who only learned her worth the day it was printed in the papers. And Brielle? Brielle did the most honest thing she had ever done. The morning the money disappeared, she packed her things. Elijah found her at the door with 2 suitcases. "Where are you going?" he said. "We're getting married, you and me. We can rebuild." Brielle looked at him, and for once she didn't bother lying. "Rebuild with what?" she said. "I didn't sign up for poor." And she walked out, past him, through the door. Gone. You see the irony, don't you? The woman who swore she'd never be left behind, who climbed over a marriage so she'd never be poor again, ended up alone with nothing. She left so she wouldn't be left. And she ended up the one walking away from an empty house, just like her mother before her. Some people run so hard from their past that they run straight into it. Cornelius lost the thing he loved more than his own family, his legend. The papers ran the true history now. Founder rescued in secret, saved by the very man he never thanked. Built his crown on borrowed ground. Every article was a small stone, and together they buried the myth of Cornelius Carter for good. Gloria, who had built her whole self on looking down on Imani, on calling her a girl from nothing, now had to walk through the same city she once ruled and hear people call that girl by her full name. Mrs. Carter, the owner, the woman who really held it all. Every "good morning, ma'am" Gloria received now had a smirk hidden behind it. The town remembered how she'd treated the quiet one. Towns always remember. Terrence, who had filmed Imani's humiliation to laugh at later, found his own video turned around on him. The footage he'd posted to mock her now played on every screen as proof of how a good woman was treated by a cruel family. His grin, frozen in those clips, became the face of everything people hated about the Carters. And Imani? Imani did not gloat. Watch her here, because this is where you see who she really is. She had every right to burn it all down, to strip the Carter name off every plane and every gate, to leave Cornelius with nothing the way they'd tried to leave her. She didn't. She walked into Cornelius's empty office one last time, where the old man sat staring at a desk that wasn't his anymore. She set a single page in front of him. "You can keep the name," she said. "On the building, on the planes. The world knows the truth now. It won't save your pride. But your grandchildren shouldn't have to grow up under a name that means shame. So keep it." Carter. It was always the loud part anyway. And that mercy hurt him more than revenge ever could. Because she was the bigger person, and they both knew it, and there was nothing he could do with that but sit in it. She turned and walked out of that office the same way she'd walked out of the terminal. Back straight, head high, quiet. She never raised her voice once. She never had to. In the end, she went back to where the rain sounds like applause. The tin-roofed church was still there, a little more rust on it now. The porch steps where her father told her about loud names and quiet ownership were still there too. She sat on them in the evening, the way she had as a girl, and watched the sky turn gold. A plane crossed it, high up, silver in the last light. Maybe one of hers, maybe not. It didn't matter anymore. That was the thing she finally understood. Owning the sky had never been the point. Knowing your own worth when the whole world swore you had none, that was the point. That was the inheritance. A little girl from the neighborhood ran up to the porch. Bright eyes, shoes a size too big, the kind of kid the world hadn't made room for yet. Imani smiled at her, and she reached into her pocket and pulled out the brass luggage tag, worn smooth by 3 sets of thumbs now, her father's and hers and the years in between. She pressed it into the little girl's palm and closed her small fingers around it. The girl turned it over and read the words slowly, the way you read something you'll remember your whole life. You carry your own name. "What's it mean?" the girl asked. Imani looked out at the gold sky and the silver plane fading into it. "It means," she said softly, "don't ever let nobody tell you what you're worth. They'll try, they always try. Let them think you're small." She smiled. "Small things move where big things can't." The girl ran off into the dusk, the brass tag shining in her fist, and Imani let it go. That's the part that matters. She gave the tag away, because a thing like that was never meant to be held. It was meant to be passed. From a tired man with grease under his nails, to a quiet girl on the porch steps, to a woman who walked out of a terminal without shaking, to a little girl in shoes a size too big, who didn't know yet how big she was going to be. That's how the real inheritance moves, not the money. The money was never the point, and if you've been waiting this whole story for her to buy something, you missed what her father was trying to teach her. The real inheritance is a sentence, 4 words. and the knowing that comes with them. And Imani sat there, alone and at peace, not hardened by any of it. That's what they never understood about her. The betrayal didn't turn her cruel. It only showed the world what she'd been carrying all along. So let me leave you with this. The world will mistake your silence for weakness. It will mistake your kindness for foolishness. It will look at how little noise you make and decide you must have little worth. Let them. Because a quiet woman is not an empty one, and the people who underestimate you are only telling you how little they ever truly saw. You carry your own name. Don't let anybody spend it for you. If Imani's strength moved you tonight, do something for her and for yourself. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments below, have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you? Share this with someone who needs to be reminded tonight that they carry their own name. I'll see you in the next story.